Hello guys, welcome back to the MMA Sucker channel. As always, I'm Frazer Krohn, and how I'm going to structure this one is I'm going to give a brief rundown on what the sort of structure of the podcast is going to be going forward to the beginning of the new year. I'm then going to look at this past weekend's PFL Dublin tournament, this past weekend's UFC tournament, and then I'm going to finish off giving a bit of a preview for UFC 296. But as you guys know now, I don't like doing, well, I prefer to do reviews rather than previews of fights that have gone down at the weekend. So how the podcast is going to go for the next few weeks? Obviously, you've got today's episode. Well, I'm recording this on Sunday night, so it'll come out on the Monday or the Tuesday. You've got this week's episode looking forward to UFC 296, and I'm going to do an episode next week looking back at UFC 296 and the fallout from that event, which promises to be a really good event. It might take a week off, or it might be a slightly different schedule. But I'm then going to do a end of year awards, and I'm going to sort of look forward to 2024 in both the UFC, PFL, and / Bellator One Championship. What boxing matches and boxing fights we've got coming up, and I may also, depending on my work schedule, I may also look at doing a preview of the I think it's called Day of Reckoning boxing card on the 23rd of December, headlined by, of course, Anthony Joshua and Otto Wallin. We've got Deontay Wilder and Joe Parker on there. We've got Dubois and Jarrell Miller. We've got we've got a whole host of massive names on that card. It's one of the better cards of the year, happening from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on the 23rd of December. So, like I say, I'll possibly look to drop a short preview for that as well. But like I said, this week's episode, PFL Dublin went down on Friday night, and it was a really good event. I really enjoyed it. I'd say that there was definitely some upsets and some fights that maybe didn't go the PFL's way, as it were. And I think that there were some fights that really went the PFL's way. In the main event, we obviously had Nathan Kelly versus Dimitri Sulaimez. Nathan Kelly looks like the real deal. He really does look very, very good. He lost his first two pro fights dating back. Let me just double check. He debuted in 2017, lost his debut, came back in 2018, lost a split decision on the Bama card. But since then, he's won 9 straight, of which 7 have come via finish. Obviously, he's now 4-0 in the PFL with 3 finishes. He's a serious prospect in this in the featherweight division, and at 26 years old, he's got a big future ahead of him. He'll likely be entered into the 2024 featherweight tournament, because I think that's what PFL really need to do is push this younger generation, this new talent. And what's the point in giving these guys and girls fights if they're not going to have the opportunity to progress on and feature in these tournaments? He's got huge support from the Irish crowd and the Irish fans, of course. And yeah, like I said, I think he's got a real future ahead of him. But he looks like the real deal. First round submission on Friday night, just a really solid performance. The next fight down the card was the bantamweight tournament finals between Kushred Kakharov. Again, I said last week and I'll say it again this week. I'm awful at pronunciation, but he looked good. And at bantamweight, I think there's a fight with Brett Johns. In the future. Brett Johns competed on the undercard of this fight card. He picked up the win. And I think, Brett Johns definitely goes underappreciated. He's fought for everyone. He's fought for the UFC. He's fought for Bellator. Now he's fighting for PFL. He's fought for Cage Warriors. He's really, if you look at the 2 losses that he has, the 3 career losses that he has, he lost to Aljamain Sterling, who obviously then went on to be champion. He lost to Pedro Munoz, who obviously then who is a perennial contender at 135, and he lost to the former title challenger in Bellator, Danny Sabatello. So, and that I believe was up at no, that was down at bantamweight. So, I think Brett Johns does go massively underappreciated. A Welshman competing on the Europe card, I think he did really, really well. what I would say is there's a massive fight on the horizon for Karakov with Brett Johns. Brett Johns actually holds a win over him back in the Bellator days, so that one kind of writes itself. I'll also say that the PFL are very, very happy that Dakota Ditcheva won. I've put in my notes here, Ditcheva wins, PFL equals happy. And the reason for that is that she's so marketable. She's an excellent fighter. She's a great talker. She's got a lot of a massive support from the north of England. When I covered the PFL in London last year, I think it was a semi-final. It's Dakota's debut. The amount of support that was there for just Dakota was quite a to be honest, it was quite a surprise. Because of she's not at the time. I think she was 6-0 when she made her PFL debut. Sorry, 5-0. She was 5-0, and she finished all of her PFL fights now. She finished first round, third round in the semi-finals, and obviously this one goes down as a doctor stoppage due to the swollen eye, as it were, of Scatisi. But the knees in the clinch were what sort of caused that swollen eye, I believe. Obviously, that led to the stoppage, and it's just phenomenal work. And I did give her quite a hard time, not her personally, but I gave the matchmaking quite a hard time. She really needs a good test now, but I think that she makes her. Well, I saw a debate point online as to whether the opponents that she faces are poor or whether she's so good it makes them look poor. And I'm really beginning to think that it's the latter. That she's so good, she's making her opponents look poor. I'm chuffed for Dakota because I interviewed her before her debut in August last year. Like I say, she's progressed to 5-0 in August in the PFL since August of last year. So just a little over a year, she's 5-0. She's the flyweight tournament winner. She's the face of the flyweight division now, and she's going to carry that confidence into next year's flyweight tournament. I'm really happy for her because also with the PFL sort of buying Bellator, there's a lot more girls with more recognizable names with decent, records and more challenges for Dakota. I'll post my interview down below. But like I said, I'm really happy for her. And she deserves it because she was really, really good on the night, and she's been really, really solid and throughout this tournament. She's been the best fighter throughout this tournament. Something that didn't go, and like I say, the PFL are happy that she won, and I think something that the PFL aren't happy about, and are slightly gutted about if they're honest with themselves, is Simeon Powell. He was on the wrong end of a big upset. He was caught being slightly lazy maybe in his defense when he sort of came out of range, and he was made to pay for it. But he suffered his first pro loss on Friday night, sorry, via KO. He's 24 years old, and rest assured he'll be back to he'll be better than ever, Simeon Powell. He's a big guy for the weight class at 205, and he was just beaten by the better man on the night. I think Jacob Nido goes on to compete in the light heavyweight tournament next season in 2024, and I think Simeon Powell, don't be surprised to see him as an alternate. Don't be surprised to see him also out fairly soon. I think he'll want to get that one back. Maybe not against Nido, but he'll want to get that one back. Two more talking points from PFL Dublin, or about 2.5 more talking points, should we say, from PFL Dublin. Lewis McGrillen loses for the first time. It looked like when he can't KO his opponent early, let's be honest, he's got the touch of death. He doesn't just knock people out, he causes them to go stiff. And when he couldn't do that, he didn't seem to have too much of a plan B. He was very humble in defeat, and that's nice to see after his kind of antics during fight week. He'll be back for sure. I think he's 23 years old or 24 years old. He'll be back. But, it is a first pro loss, and it is what it is for McGrillen. And Nate Kelly, you can't put an awful lot of stock into it because it is an amateur fight. However, it was a good win. It's a good finish. He got the crowd going straight away, straight from the off. But one of the main talking points to come out from the event was that we had Michael Venom Page, Bellator's Michael Venom Page, face off with Cedric Doumbia in what was the last event for 2023 for the PFL. And it looks ahead to a massive 2024 for them. That fight is, if that happens, is mouth-watering. I think it would be an excellent fight if it happens. But they're already kind of setting things up for 2024, which is a very sensible thing to do, of course. And I think the 2024 is going to be make or break for the PFL. If this acquisition of Bellator goes how they think it will go and how they're anticipating it goes, they cement themselves as the second best promotion in MMA today. If it doesn't, it could be a big loss of earnings for everybody involved. It could, we don't want PFL fighters to be going down the Bellator route of sort of gimme fights, as it were, and fights where you already kind of know the outcome before the fight happens. It's massive. It's a massive year for the PFL and everyone involved with the PFL. And I think it's going to be a good year for the PFL. I'll talk more about it in my sort of 2024 preview, which will come out, like I said, later on this month, or even early in January, depending on the sort of scope of the sort of goings on, as it were. But it is massive. It is a massive year for the PFL. Like I say, I always like to give the events a rating. I'd give this one a 6 out of 10. It would be harder to go any lower because we did see finishes. We did see, the crowd was really good. We saw, lots of back-to-back finishes. What I would say is that it's just, to be honest, I know it sounds a little bit elitist, but it's just kind of the name value. It was just kind of the name value that kind of led to this one not quite getting over that line, as it were. But I think a 6 out of 10 is really good for a PFL event, which let's not forget, this isn't prime PFL. This isn't your Kayla Harrisons and your Oliver Bin Merciers and your Impika Sanganars, your Brendan Lochnanes, anywhere, Jesus Pineda, and all people like that. This is the sort of second string of PFL fighters. It's the young and upcomers. It's like in boxing where we have these next gen cards, and it was a really good event. 6 out of 10, I think, is a solid score. It's average. It's a solid score for a PFL sort of second string event, which is more than I can say about the UFC event that went down this weekend. As I said, on paper there was a few sleeper fights, but nothing that really got us sort of up and out of our seats ahead of Fight Night. And unfortunately, that kind of played out on Fight Night. In the main event, Song Yadong was just better than Chris Gutierrez in this one. He was, and although that sounds like sort of lazy, analysis and journalism or whatever you want to call it, that's simply what it was. He was just the better fighter in there, and that's why he cruised to a 5-round victory. I think let me just pull up the official scorecard here. Song Yadong versus Chris Gutierrez. Yeah, so 50-45 and 50 on 2 scorecards and 50-44 on 1. That's a shutout. From start to finish, Song Yadong was the better fighter. Gutierrez looked like he didn't want to be in there and admitted he was scared in fight week. He looked like he was going in there to not be knocked out rather than going in there to try and win the fight. And it's a little bit, it was disappointing. I'll be honest, I didn't quite understand the matchmaking heading into it. Chris Gutierrez is coming off 1 win. He had got a little bit of momentum heading into a little bit of momentum last year with the win over Frankie Edgar in MSG. But then he lost to Pedro Munoz. He got 1 win back, and then he was sort of thrust into the main event. And he admitted that he was scared of Song Yadong and Song Yadong's the power that we know that he's got. I'll be honest, it looked like that, and that's what was so disappointing for me. For Yadong, it's a solid win over a respectable name, over a guy who has been in there with some good guys, who was ranked. it was just disappointing. Song Yadong can only beat what's in front of him. But for me, Chris Gutierrez went in there not to lose the fight. He went in there not to win the fight. He went in there not to get knocked out. He didn't go in there to try and win the fight, which is, for me, it's always disappointing when a fighter does that, and it happens more often than you think. Like I said, for Song Yadong, he can only beat what's in front of him. He set up a big 2024. He's riding a 2-fight win streak now over Ricky Simone and now Chris Gutierrez. The thing that will scupper him is he likely won't move up in the rankings, because I think Gutierrez was ranked 15th and Song Yadong was ranked number 8. No, so Song Yadong was ranked number 7. Sorry, Chris Gutierrez was ranked number 15. I think the call out of Petr Yan was really sensible. If you look at the division as how the division is going to play out, you've got Sean O'Malley already booked with number 6 ranked Marlon Vera. Aljamain Sterling kind of sat out waiting, possibly going up to featherweight. Literally, as I was sorting my setup out, we had the official announcement from Henry Cejudo's YouTube channel that him and Merab Dvalishvili will be meeting. That was kind of official. We knew that was going to happen. I think that's happening in February. Sandhagen is out with the injury after he beat the brakes off. I can't remember. I can't remember who Corey Sandhagen beat last, but I know that he dominated him over 5 rounds. I think that might have been. So no, it was Rob Font. So he beat Rob Font over 5 rounds, but he injured himself back. That was back in August. So the next logical, and Corey Sandhagen obviously holds a win over Song Yadong. I think Song would like to get that one back because it was stopped on a doctor's stoppage due to a cut. But the logical call out is Petr Yan. Petr Yan was too busy facing off with Conor McGregor. If everyone saw that, I'm sure you did. But yeah, like I said, he's too busy. He didn't seem interested in the fight. He posted an emoji on Twitter, yawning emoji. What we can take out of that is it is what it is. But like I said, solid win for Song Yadong in the main event. For me, the performance of the night was Khalil Roundtree Jr. showed what he's all about, and he all but retired Anthony Smith. He dominated from start to finish, and he did what we want to see people do: is dominate a fight and then finish the fight. And yes, I think Smith took this one on late notice, but for me, Smith is one that it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell if Anthony Smith likes fighting or not, to be honest. He's had so many fights. His record now sits at 37, 19 and 0. He's 1 and 3 in his last 4 fights, with the only win coming via split decision against Ryan Spann. But at the end of the day, like I said, Khalil Roundtree, like I said with Song Yadong, he can only beat what's in front of him. And Khalil Roundtree was really good. He was really solid. The finish was brutal, and then he broke his tradition of not calling anyone out by calling out Alex Pereira. He's unlikely to get that fight, but it's a fun fight if it would ever to be booked. I think their styles match up well, and Khalil Roundtree is full of highlights to sell that fight. Alexander Rakic is looking for an opponent after Jan Blachowicz pulled out. Now that's a potential. Just looking at the rankings now, I'm not sure how much Khalil Roundtree will jump up in the rankings. He's number 11. Anthony Smith is number 8. There's a potential that there's a little bit of sort of movement there. And, Alexander Rakic is ranked number 5. I think that's a fight that really could be booked. And I think, again, their styles make fights. I think that makes for an exciting fight. I really want to see Khalil Roundtree in a Fight Night main event next. See if he can go 5 rounds, see what his cardio is like over 5 rounds. He's got a great story to tell. So naturally, he'll just, he'll sell the fight just on his backstory alone, let alone his fighting style and his personality these days. So that's got big potential. Someone else that is still showing potential is Tim Elliott. He got back in the win column, obviously, after losing to Mohamed Mokaev. Great first round sub. But this whole event felt like a filler event. It felt like the UFC had signed up to X amount of fight nights this year, and they had to fill one. Obviously, this card was meant to be in Shanghai. It got moved to the Apex. So that was a disappointment from the off. I've scored this one a 4 out of 10, which is way below average. 6 is average out. 6 out of 10 is average. I've scored this a 4 out of 10, and the reason for that is I like the fights to have some meaning behind them. None of these fights did. Song Yadong and Chris Gutierrez, the winner of this one, irrespective of who won or how they won, were never going to get a title shot. Khalil Rountree Jr., Anthony Smith, they're lucky that this fight was on this card because it was a late notice addition to this card after Rountree had an opponent pull out recently. But it's just, simply put, it's just none of these, there's no jeopardy in this fight for as far as a title shot or really a ranking. You know, you're talking sort of 8 ranked guys on this one, which, you know, like I said, Khalil Rountree put in a really good performance. Tim Elliott put in a really good performance. Nasrat Haqparast, really good first round KO of Jamie Mullarkey. He's so tough, Jamie Mullarkey, but he was on the end of a bad one in this one. And, you know, at the end of the day, you've got a poor scorecard with Andre Muniz winning, and you haven't got for me, there wasn't really like a standout star. Tatsuro Taira progressed to 15-0 with a finish. He was one of my 20, I think it's 25 to watch under 25 or 25 to watch under 23. He was one of my ones to watch. I keep an eye on him, but overall, I think a 4 out of 10 is a fair score for a fight night where the main event, you saw Song Yadong cruise to a victory and never really get the opportunity to finish the fight. And you saw Chris Gutierrez to navigate his way through 25 minutes and never really try and finish the fight himself. Now, UFC 296. As we know, fights are never played out on paper, never fought on paper, but on paper, this is the best fight card of the year for me, without a shadow of a doubt. You've got a really good main event, you've got a really good co-main event. The main card is just full of competitive fights and fights where there's jeopardy in all of the fights, there's talking points going in all of the fights. The headline of the prelims, you've got a really competitive fight. You've got in that fight, Bryce Mitchell coming in on short notice to face Josh Emmett. You've got former title challenger Irene Aldana, who looked like a killer before she faced Amanda Nunes, and then just shit the bed when she fought Amanda Nunes. Former champion Cody Garbrandt returns. Katie O'Neill looks to bounce back from the first loss of her career. Hard-hitting Alonzo Menafield faces the always game Dustin Jacoby. Andre Feely is on this card, who is, I mean, never in a boring fight. I think we've got the UFC debut of Shamil Gaziev. He takes on Martin Pede, and a fight that is massively going under the radar. Randy Brown and Muslim Salikov. Tapology have got them two guys opening up the entire fight card. So without a doubt, on paper, you've got maybe, in my opinion, the fight card of the year to round out what has been a very good year for the UFC. Main event time, though, UFC 296. Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington is a great headliner. Welterweight strap on the line. Leon Edwards looking to make his second defense of the belt. Covington, for me, last chance saloon. I think if Covington loses this, we don't see him compete again in the UFC because his shtick's over then. I think his psychological game has become, it's getting a bit old. He's trying to make a rivalry out of nothing. You know, him and Kamaru Usman did have a rivalry. There's no doubting about that. Him and Jorge Masvidal had a real life rivalry. There's no doubt about that. And it's continued on after the fight. Him and Tyron Woodley, when they fought, had a real life rivalry. Him and Leon Edwards don't have a rivalry. Leon Edwards is just the guy that holds the belt, and Colby's the guy that wants the belt, which is absolutely fine. But don't try and make a rivalry out of something that it's not. And I don't think Leon Edwards is going to take the bait. The reason I don't think he's going to take the bait is because it does have a massive thing to do with the culture that he comes from in the UK. Guys in the UK, and I'm sure this is the same for many a fighter, they're constantly bantering each other. They're constantly saying shit to one another. They're constantly trying to get under each other's skin. And it's water off a duck's back. And I think that's the way that Leon's going to handle this press conference on, I think it's going to be Thursday. It's going to handle this fight week. I'm a little concerned that Leon only traveled to Vegas this weekend. I would have preferred for him to travel into Vegas, a couple of weeks ago to get a little bit better acclimatized. In my opinion, that potentially a mistake, but we'll see how that plays out. But what I do think is interesting is that there's going to be a lot of focus on people around the main card rather than on Leon Edwards himself. You're going to have all the Ian Gary stuff. Ian Gary and Leon Edwards train together. That does involve Leon Edwards, yes, but you're going to have all the Ian Gary stuff. Cody Garbrandt's on the card. Cody Garbrandt is a massive talk. I don't think he'll be at the press conference, but I'm sure Ian Gary will. Paddy Pimblett's on the card. The return of Paddy Pimblett, massive factor in a lot of the onus being taken off Leon Edwards to try and promote this card. Because Colby Covington will shoot on everyone. He'll shoot on Leon. He'll shoot on Ian Gary. He might even go for Paddy Pimblett. And it's not going to work. I don't think Leon Edwards is going to sort of rise to the occasion and take the bait, as it were. And the reason for that, like I say, is because we have that kind of banter in the UK. It's given out and taken every single day in the workplace, in the gyms and stuff that Leon Edwards is going to frequent. And also, you've got other guys on the card that are going to look to steal the show. Ian Gary and Paddy Pimblett, to name just two. With regards to the fight itself, the main event itself, Leon did really well against Kamaru Usman, especially in their second fight in the wrestling realm. And Kamaru's a far better MMA wrestler than Colby Covington, who is an MMA wrestler. The pace that Covington sets could cause Leon Edwards issues. We saw in the first fight with Kamaru Usman, Leon Edwards' first fight with Kamaru Usman, that he did gas and he pulled out the knockout of the year without a doubt. But he did gas in that one. Completely different circumstances. That was in Utah, quite far above sea level. So, the air was thinner, all that, blah, 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 blah. The air's dry in Vegas, as we know, and he's only gone out this week. So that could play an issue. However, if he's prepared well, he should be okay. The sharpshooting strikes of Edwards, I think, could cause Covington problems and get him in trouble. His defense sometimes is questionable. He does get hit. He was finished by Kamaru Usman in their first fight. He did get cracked pretty badly by Jorge Masvidal when those guys fought. But the two things that I think are going to be are going to play a massive part. Colby hasn't competed since March of 2022. You're talking, 21 months out of the octagon? 21 months we haven't seen Colby Covington make the walk. We haven't seen Colby Covington compete in 21 months. That's a long time. He's going to have some degree of ring rust. And it's not because, from what I understand, it's not because he's had injuries. He's just sat out since then. For context, Leon Edwards has had 2 title fights since that time, both against Kamaru Usman. Both went the best part of 25 minutes. The last one did go 25 minutes, and the one before that went just over 24 minutes. He's been active. He's the more active guy. He's going to find his range quicker than Colby Covington. And I do think that will play a part. The knees and elbows in the clinch of Leon Edwards are going to be vital, because Covington's going to look to close the distance, get close to Leon, wear him out, work the clinch. And we know how good Leon Edwards is off the, hitting elbows off the clinch. Just ask Gunnar Nelson, who got dropped heavily by one of those in London a couple of years ago. I think Leon Edwards retains, and I'm really, really excited to break it down next week once the fights happen. But I do think Leon Edwards retains. I think he could even finish him late on. If he's on it, I think he can finish him. But I wouldn't be surprised to see this go in 25 minutes. But for me, it's all about what Colby Covington, what kind of mindset Colby Covington comes in. Because if he loses this one, he's out. 3 title shots, 3 losses. The hype around Colby Covington disintegrates, and it's going to be. I'm really excited for this. Is the most excited I've been for a fight week in a very long time. The co-main event. It's the first flyweight title fight to be contested, not featuring either Moreno or Figueiredo in the past 50 years. Just let that sink in. 50 years it's been since those two men have competed in a title fight. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating a little. It's not quite 50 years, but this is big. And sorry, going back to the main event, we learned this week that Belal Muhammad will be weighing in as the backup fighter. So that kind of cements him as the next contender for the belt, which is more than deserved. I say that this fight won't be competed between, well, it will be the first one not featuring Moreno or Figueiredo in the past 50 years. That is if both men make the walk. If one man can't make the walk, Moreno will be weighing in as the backup fighter. But let's hope that, hope that doesn't happen, and Pantoja and Brandon Royval can make the walk. We saw in his last fight that Pantoja's got that dog in him, and his will to win gets him through fights as well as his skill. And his will to win could be a huge one in this one, especially because he's already beat Brandon Royval back in 2021, I believe. Yeah, 2021. And he did so by finish. So he's already got that in the back of his mind. Brandon Royval has already got that in the back of his mind that he can be finished by this guy. He's on a good run of 3 straight victories, though, is Brandon Royval. None bigger than his last, a big, devastating KO win over Mateus Nicolau, who I thought could be a title contender in the coming months. Obviously, it wasn't to be. It might still be, but it wasn't to be. And Brandon Royval has got the opportunity. Royval will be determined to get the fight back from Pantoja that he lost. Like I said, he finished him last time, and I think for me, I'm picking Pantoja via round 3 sub or round 4 sub, and the reason for that is that I think he'll grow into being a champion. He'll stand that little bit taller. His chest will be pushed out that little bit more, and he'll grow. He's now the hunted, and I think that that's going to play a massive, massive factor in this fight, because I think that I think that he's going to, he's going to feel like he's the champion, and because he is the champion, of course, but he's going to really feel like he's the champion. He's got to go out there. He's got to defend his belt. He's got to, prove people wrong that thought that he didn't beat Brandon Moreno. He's got to do what he did last time against Brandon Royval. I think he's skilled enough to do that. And that sets up a big 2024 for the flyweight division. Pantoja retains, in my opinion. The next fight on the card is an absolutely excellent one. This is why I think it's the best fight card of the year. Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Without a doubt, the biggest test of Shavkat's career. He's 17-0 with 17 finishes. 8 wins by a TKO or KO, and 9 wins by submission. I think Shavkat will be champion one day. However, his last fight against Jeff Neal showed that he can be hurt when he's landed upon, and you don't want Stephen Wonderboy Thompson to land on you from any angle, from at any range. His easiest way to victory would be to go in there, look to take Stephen Wonderboy Thompson down, dominate on the floor, and look for that submission. That's not easy. That's not easily done. Thompson has a 64% takedown defense and has faced some of the best wrestlers in the game. Yes, he has sometimes struggled against these wrestlers. We saw him against Bilal Muhammad. We saw him against Gilbert Burns. Tyron Woodley was able to get him to the ground in their first, I think, and second fight. But let's not forget just how good he is, Stephen Thompson. His last fight was in December of last year, so he's been out of the ring for a year now. However, he did make weight in July, and his opponent, Michel Pereira, didn't. So I imagine he was paid for that one. But like I say, he's 40 years old now, Wonderboy. Father Time has got to catch up with him at some point. This one, for me, I'm picking Shavkat because I pick Shavkat every fight. I think the guy's going to be champion one day. I just think that there's going to be a changing of the guard fight. I think Shavkat might do it by submission. Like I say, his easiest key to victory would be just to take Stephen Wonderboy Thompson down, because Wonderboy is so good on the feet. And, a lot of Wonderboy's style does rely on him being, his reactions in being quick, and he's being faster than his opponent. And at 40 years old, I'm just not sure that he can do it at the very, very highest level anymore. These guys, they're still both highly ranked. Shavkat ranked number 5, Stephen Thompson ranked number 6. It's a phenomenal fight. It really is. It's a fight night headliner every day of the week, and this is the third fight on the card. It's the main event of fights on the main card that aren't title fights. So that kind of shows you what stock the UFC are willing to put in people like Shavkat and Wonderboy. It's gonna be a really, really good fight. As is the next fight on the main card, Paddy Pimblett versus Tony Ferguson. Now, this for me is also a potential changing of the guard fight. Paddy Pimblett coming off that controversial win against Jared Gordon, Tony Ferguson enduring through a 6-fight losing streak. He's just gone through Hell Week, which I wrote about, which I'll link down below, with David Goggins. Paddy Pimblett gave his opinion on that, which is spoke about in the article that I just mentioned. How does this one go? Nobody knows. On paper, Tony Ferguson should walk through Paddy Pimblett. He's got more experience. He's fought at a very, very high level, Tony Ferguson. He's fought some of the best guys. He's got amazing cardio. He's got finishing power. But in his last fight against Bobby Green, he looked awful. In the fight before that against Nick Diaz, he didn't look great. The fight before that, he didn't look great. Against Michael Chandler, he looked good in that first round, and then he was caught. In the fight before that against Beneil Dariush, he was dominated. In the fight before that against Charles Oliveira, he was dominated. He's got no confidence heading in there. Whereas Paddy Pimblett is the complete opposite. He's full to the brim of confidence. He's riding a 4-fight win streak, biggest win of his career against Jared Gordon last time out. He's outspoken, as we well know, with Paddy Pimblett. And he's got a lot of potential, Paddy Pimblett. But how is this one going to go? I think this one, for me, is potentially the most difficult one on the card to pick. I'm going to say Tony Ferguson's going to win it, but I would not be surprised if Paddy Pimblett won it. And likewise, in the fight that's opening up the main card, Ian Garry versus Vicente Luque. Former teammates. Ian Garry has had the week from hell, which I wrote about, and I'll link down below last week, with regards to his relationship and whatnot. But he's 13-0, Ian Garry, and his last two wins, have been really, really good wins. Finished Daniel Rodriguez in the first round, and then went the distance and absolutely dominated Neil Magny. I can't remember, but I'll just double check. I mean, he's not granted, Ian Garry outlanded Neil Magny 111-51 on total strikes, 91-27 on significant strikes. That's a domination, whichever way you look at it. I think he dropped Magny multiple times with leg kicks in that one, which could play a factor in this one. But let's not forget that Vicente Luque is one of the most dangerous welterweights on the roster at the moment. He's coming off a 5-round win over Rafael dos Anjos. Yes, he lost to Jeff Neal. Yes, he lost to Bilal Muhammad. But before that, beat Michael Chiesa by Darth choke, beat Tyron Woodley by Darth choke, beat Randy Brown by KO, beat Nico Price. Yes, he lost a decision to Stephen Thompson, but beat Mike Perry, beat Jalen Turner, a fight that's aged really well. He also does hold a win over Bilal Muhammad back at UFC 205. Vicente Luque is one of the, I think the Silent Assassin is a perfect nickname for him because he's one of the most underappreciated fighters on the roster. He's violent. He comes in there to fight every single time. And I think that he could still make a run at the title. But first, he's got to get through Ian Garry. Like I said, Ian Garry, 13-0, 7 wins by finish, 1 win by submission, 5 wins by decision. Again, I just can't wait for this fight. And this one and the Paddy Pimblett fight. I think Vicente Luque is going to win this one. I think he's going to hand Ian Garry his first loss. But I also think that Ian Garry could simply be too long, too sharp, too quick, and outpoint Vicente Luque to a unanimous decision. I really don't know which way this one's going to go. I'll save my pick for the MMA Soccer Picks when I've seen how both guys handle the press conference, because Ian Garry isn't going to be fully focused on this fight, in my opinion. He's got so much going on outside the octagon. He's gonna struggle mentally when he gets inside the octagon. Now, I'll be willing to hold my hands up next week when I record the podcast and say that I'm wrong if he manages to handle it. But it's all whether he does manage to handle it, and we'll find out on Saturday night. Like I said, guys, I'm just going to briefly, quick tagline on a few of the fights I'm most looking forward to on the card. On the undercard, Cody Garbrandt looking to go back-to-back for the first time since he captured the belt in 2016. He takes on Brian Keller. It's a bit of a sort of layout fight for Garbrandt. If he can wrestle in this one, like we know that he can, I think it's going to be beneficial for him. Irene Aldana takes on Carol Rosa. How does she bounce back from that? I'd go as far as to say embarrassing loss to Amanda Nunes last time out. She was she spoke a good game ahead of that one, and she just didn't turn up in that one at all. It was like I say, it's a pretty embarrassing loss to Amanda Nunes. She won every round. It could, the towel could have been thrown in. But a fight that I'm really, really looking forward to is Casey O'Neill's return. She takes on Ariane Lipski. Casey O'Neill lost her first ever professional fight last time out when she took on Jennifer Maia in London, I believe that was in March. I still think Casey O'Neill's going to be the flyweight champion one day, but she's got to get past Ariane Lipski, who's riding, I think, a 2-fight win streak. Lipski, beat JJ Aldrich in March of this year, beat Melissa Gatto in July of this year. It's going to be a tough fight for Casey O'Neill because styles make fights. Ariane Lipski is a stand-up fighter. Casey O'Neill wants to try and get the fight to the floor and work a pretty elite ground game. The only thing was against Jennifer Maia, she was badly outstruck, outlanded, and Ariane Lipski has a 78% takedown defense. For me, if I was Casey O'Neill, I'd just have been working on my hand, working on my wrestling, and working on getting the fight to the floor, because that's what she needs to do against Ariane Lipski. Because, like I say, Lipski is dangerous on the feet, and for me, Casey O'Neill can't afford another straight loss. But I think that she'll bounce back from it well. She's still young, she's still got tons of ambition, she's still got tons of potential. But it's going to be a tough fight against Lipski, and that's why I'm looking forward to it so much on the prelims. Like I said, guys, that's today's episode. For me, UFC Fight Night, Song versus Gutierrez can be put in the rear view now. Very instantly forgettable fight night, unfortunately. Like I said, 4 out of 10 for me. All about the biggest card of the year, UFC 296. I cannot wait to watch it on Saturday night and break it all down on the podcast next week for you guys. I'm hoping Leon gets the win. UK guy. I'm hoping Leon gets the win. I think Pantoja will get the win. I think Shavkat will get the win. I think Tony might bounce back in this one and get the win against Paddy, but I really wouldn't be surprised if Paddy got the win in that one. And for me, it's all about watching the fight week antics play out, listening to a few of the interviews. I hope the journalists and the media guys, ask Ian Gary the right questions. Where's your head at? You've had so much going on outside of the octagon. Where's your head at ahead of this one? You guys have trained together. How do you think that'll impact the fight? I really hope they ask the right questions, because if they don't, it's going to be a real disappointment. But I'll make my pick for Ian Gary versus Vicente Luque on the MMA Sucker Picks. It will be up, of course, at the weekend. And Josh Emmett versus Bryce Mitchell, I actually forgot to touch on. I think Josh Emmett goes in there, and I think he probably knocks Bryce Mitchell out, hands Bryce Mitchell another loss. Fair play to Bryce Mitchell, though, stepping in on short notice to face one of the most dangerous guys in the division, a guy that, he's coming off, I think, 2 straight losses, Josh Emmett. But let's not forget that one of those losses was in an interim title fight against Yair Rodriguez, and the next loss was a 5-round decision against a guy who's going to be competing for the title early next year. That was the MMA Soccer Podcast, guys. Thank you for listening. Like, subscribe, follow, and all that good stuff. And I'll speak to you next week on what promises to be a really entertaining episode when I break down UFC 296. Thank guys. Take it easy. Have a good week. Cheers.